Today we'll be talking about Jupiter and Gemini through each of the houses and what this placement means for you if you have it in your natal chart, or if it's in somebody else's natal chart, what it means for them. With that being said, what Jupiter represents is it represents abundance, good fortune, expansion, freedom, and optimism, as well as a few other things like knowledge, education, and beliefs. It's also about our morals and our philosophy. And it acts as a compass for ourselves because it's like our philosophical compass, our moral compass. With that being said, Gemini is the sign of intellect and the mind. It's also about communication. So those that have Jupiter and Gemini, their good fortune comes from information or communication in some sense. And it comes from opportunities. They can also make a fortune from trade and commerce because Gemini is ruled by Mercury, who was the god of commerce. He was also the Greek god of messages, deliveries, and communication. So with that being said, Jupiter also expands the area of the chart that it's in. It brings like an abundance of the energy of the sign that it's in. So whichever house you have Jupiter and Gemini in, you have an abundance of thought. Like you think about that a lot. And you just also have a lot of inspiration or ideas because the sign Gemini is about the mind. Furthermore, Jupiter in Gemini will show good humor and optimism because not only is Jupiter about humor, but so is Mercury, which is the ruler of Gemini. So usually these people have a good sense of humor, and they're jokesters, they have a lot of funny thoughts, Anyway, what else is Jupiter in Gemini? Well, Jupiter is about beliefs and Gemini is about information and the media. So these people have a general belief in information. They have a belief in the news, or they'll have strong convictions about the news. And another thing is that Jupiter represents education and Gemini represents our neighborhood or like the immediate surroundings. So a lot of times people with Jupiter and Gemini can go to school or like go to college not far away from where they lived, or like not far from the city or the province that they're from. And anyway, now let's talk about a few celebrities that have this placement and then what it means to each of the houses. So first of all, Kanye West has this placement. And also it's important to note that Jupiter and Gemini will show somebody that has an abundance of thought or an abundance of opinions. So they can be long-winded speakers, long-winded communicators. And they're just optimistic-minded people. So next we have Grace Kelly has this placement. Oprah Winfrey has this placement. She's a prominent communicator and kind of like a guru to a lot of people. Jupiter is about gurus. Gemini is about the media. It's about communication. Next, Chris Brown has this placement. Bjork has this placement. Ashton Kutcher, Jose Bove, Daniel Radcliffe, Emma Stone, J.K. Rowling has this placement. So it's interesting that the actor that plays the role of J.K. The main character of J.K. Rowling's book, Harry Potter, has the same placement as she does. Anyway, Salman Khan has this placement. Muhammad Ali had this placement. Clint Eastwood has this Jacqueline Kennedy, Cindy Crawford, Francois Fillon, Bernie Sanders, John Travolta, Stephen Hawking. Stephen Hawking is an example of another person with a prominent mind, or who had very inspired thinking, inspired thoughts. A$AP Rocky, who is a rapper, somebody that's artistic and a natural, communicator. Charlie Sheen, Liv Tyler, Tom Brady, who also had Mars in Gemini. Tom Brady is an American football player and he's a quarterback, so it's all about passing the ball. And Gemini is an air sign. And Jupiter is about luck, or good fortune. So since it was in combination to Mars, which is about athleticism, this is showing athletic gift or athletic precision with passing the ball, or, communicating a message athletically, which would be the ball, getting it from point A to point B. It's about deliveries. Gemini is ruled by Mercury. So it's interesting, he has the planet of athleticism and the planet of fortune and good luck in the planet of delivery, or, communication. So it wouldn't be surprising if he's a good public speaker too. And a good teacher. Barbara Streisand has this placement, Willow Smith, John Wayne Gacy, John Cena, Steve McQueen, Jackie Chan, and a lot more people have this placement that I have not mentioned. There's a few prominent artists as well, like G-Eazy, that has this placement. But with that being said, now let's talk about what it means through each of the houses. So check which house Jupiter and Gemini is for you and skip to the timestamp in the description. Jupiter and Gemini in the first house will give an optimistic and humorous personality, somebody that may be a natural jokester or prankster. Because Mercury rules Gemini. Gemini is the trickster, and can be a jokester. Furthermore, your good fortune comes from when you take action and when you initiate communication, because the first house is about self, and the sign Gemini is about communication. So when you go out and ask for things or ask for opportunities, things tend to turn out well for yourself. This is also a placement that will naturally give somebody an extroverted personality, or at least people will perceive you that way, because they obviously might not be aware of the other placements, or there could be other placements that show that you're more internally introverted, but on the outside people see you as sociable. Finally, Jupiter and Gemini can show this tendency to be very opinionated, and judgmental in the when it's in the first house. Sometimes it can be negative, sometimes it can be positive. But you may also think a lot about yourself when you have Jupiter and Gemini in the first house, because there's a lot of energy of thoughts in your first house of self. So next, this leads us to Jupiter in Gemini in the second house. The second house is the house of finances, the house of talents, the house of what gives us value, and it's also about our own self-esteem, how we value ourselves. So, for one, Jupiter bestows good fortune when you become in touch with your own value. So when you raise your own self-esteem, and when that becomes the frame from which you communicate. So what does that mean? Sometimes people can build the tendency to communicate from a low place, or to communicate in a way that implies others are more important to them than them, or like that they are not worth a lot. So this is what make Jupiter in the second house suffer if that's the case. But once you essentially, Jupiter is saying that once you reach to a point that you value yourself enough and you know reflect that to the way you speak to others and ask for things, is gonna unlock a lot of fortune in your life. Now the other thing is that Gemini is about commerce. The second house is about material things. So these people can make a lot of money selling things. And Jupiter is just bringing the energy of abundance to their second house. So also they will have a lot of talents. They will be like multi-talented on an extreme level because Gemini is already about variety. And when Jupiter is in the second house, it brings multi-talented abilities, but in Gemini it can be extremely multi-talented, and they can have just a lot of different skills. And it's no surprise too that when I think about it, now that I think about it, the sign that has the second house in Gemini is Taurus, and Taurus is the sign of talent. So um literally having Taurus on your ascendant for many of you guys is just showing you guys are intrinsically very talented people. So you have a lot of like skills and stuff of that nature. And one of your skills could be singing as well, because Gemini is about communication and the use of words. So anyway, that is Jupiter in the second house in Gemini. Next, let's talk about Jupiter in Gemini in the third house. This will show somebody that has an optimistic mind. They're experimental and curious, and generally speaking, they always feel like the experiment is going to have a good outcome, or their idea is going to have a good outcome. Also, they would have a lot of internal dialogue, and even amongst others, they have a lot of dialogue because Jupiter in the third house shows you never run out of things to say. And you can also be very long-winded when coming to a point, because Jupiter goes far. Jupiter is about philosophy as well, and is about excess. It's about a lot of something. So in the third house, it can show having a lot of words, also having a lot of thoughts and opinions, and also just having an optimistic mind. So next, this leads us to Jupiter in Gemini in the fourth house. The fourth house is about intuition. It's how we solve problems, and the good fortune that Jupiter bestows when it's in the third house. In the fourth house in Gemini is this ability to solve problems using the mind. You could be extremely intelligent or intuitive, and you get great ideas of how to find fulfillment or how to resolve issues when they come up. Furthermore, Gemini is about trade and commerce and communication. And the fourth house is about our investments. So these people can make a fortune through trading investments or buying and selling real estate, because the fourth house is about homes. It's about roots, foundation. And on another end, the fourth house is about emotions. It's things that we attach ourselves to, and Gemini is about communication. So what can bring these people good fortune in life is just being genuine in their communication, or being, risk takers on an emotional level. They can have this ability to overcome the fear of vulnerability, and this is what gives credibility to a lot of their opinions, and also makes a lot of people relate to them. So these people can be great teachers because they speak how they really feel about things, and Jupiter is about teaching. Now, in general too, this placement will just show that you have a lot of internal dialogue, because the fourth house is what is internal to ourselves, and Gemini is about information, thoughts, opinions, and ideas. And for some reason, the fact that this stuff is private brings you good fortune. So like you could have the mind of a genius or some sort of inventive qualities, essentially, where you get a bunch of ideas, but the fact that they're private actually helps your abundance, you know? So that is what's giving you opportunities and stuff. Next, this leads us to Jupiter and Gemini in the fifth house. The fifth house is expressive. The fifth house is about performance. The fifth house is creative. And Gemini is about ideas. So these people are really inspired people, really optimistic, and full of creativity and inspiration. They're always following their passions. Furthermore, the fifth house wants recognition or validation. So a lot of times these people receive recognition or validation for their opinions because they have a persuasive way of communicating, and they just understand how to appeal to others using language. The fifth house, what did we say about it? It's creative, it is expressive, it's also about performance. But there was another thing too that I wanted to mention that is not immediately coming to mind. Anyway, that's besides the point. One thing's for sure, when Jupiter's in the fifth house, it gives one a lot of faith in their own opinions. Because in this case, Jupiter is in Gemini. Gemini is about thought and it's about the mind. So these can be original thinkers and they're natural leaders and trendsetters. Aquarius is the sign that has the fifth house in Gemini naturally. And Aquarius is all about inventors and geniuses. Furthermore, these individuals have an endless drive to share their opinions with the world and kind of receive recognition for their ideas. And overall, they're just inspired people that may also want to pursue creative ventures and create things such as art, perhaps music. They may want to sing or perform. And usually when it comes to performance, there's always a message or a moral to what it is that they're sharing or to their creations, because Jupiter is about teaching and it's about philosophy and morals. So overall, these people can be great teachers as well because they have natural charisma. The fifth house is about charisma. And Jupiter is showing charisma while speaking because it's in Gemini. And yeah, so that is the fifth house placement of Jupiter and Gemini. Next, this takes us to Jupiter and Gemini in the sixth house. These people have a belief in information and statistics and science because the sixth house is ruled by Mercury. Mercury is about information. And Gemini is also ruled by Mercury. Furthermore, the sixth house is an earth house, so it's about everything that's practical, real, or proven. It's all about science, evidence, and observation. And Jupiter is showing someone's faith or morality. So, for one, they will either believe in what is proven or they will believe in evidence-based convictions, or they will try to find evidence for their convictions if there aren't any evidence yet. These are also people that are very knowledgeable about practical matters and like technical subjects. They may know how to do a lot of practical things, like how to operate on a car, or how to patch a hole in drywall, or they might know how to do things around the house. They might know how to do their own plumbing, how to cut their own hair. They just know a lot of little practical things. Kind of reminds me the energy of like TikTok tutorials, like where on TikTok, there's a big community, or there's a big market for, sharing practical information, and this is like very Gemini like type of stuff. So Gemini is about practical things, it's about skills, and it's about tricks, tips and tricks. So these people are like an open book of tips and tricks. They just know a lot of information. They also know a lot of statistics and things about health, because the sixth house is about health as well. And their philosophy or beliefs tend to shape their habits and routine, because the sixth house is about routine. So they have a strong belief in routine and habits, and their habits formulate around the statistics or the information that they know. So these are people that are not passive about information. They like to form habits around what they believe to be true. So if they learn that something is unhealthy, they will be the first to remove that from their diets. Or if they learn that a certain amount of exercise is optimal for health, these are the type of people that will actually apply that into their day-to-day lives, because the sixth house is about our day-to-day lives, and it's about our habits. So this is what happens when you have the planet of beliefs in the sixth house. It shows that your habits are heavily fueled by beliefs and information at this point, because Jupiter is in the sign of information. So next, this leads us to Jupiter and Gemini in the seventh house. These individuals will receive a lot of fortune and abundance from the things that other people tell them, because the seventh house is about others and Gemini is about information or communication. So these people, another thing about those that have this placement, they are always in the know, because Jupiter shows an abundance of something, and when it's in Gemini, this is about information or communication. And the seventh house is about being connected, it's about relationships, and it's about others. So these people are always receiving the latest news, gossip, information, and opportunities from people that they know. So the number one advice for this placement is to make a lot of connections, because your connections just lead to a lot of abundance. And for some reason, people just feel this energy of wanting to share things with you, or share opportunities with you. So this is Jupiter and Gemini in the seventh house. The other thing is that these people might have a lot of faith in others, a lot of optimism, especially in the information that other people tell them, which can be positive or negative, because sometimes false information can make its way to us. And having the planet of faith in the seventh house will show a tendency to look for guidance from others, and that's also why you might receive a lot of abundance from others and opportunities from others, is because you might ask people what they think, or ask people about things a lot. So next, this leads us to Jupiter in Gemini in the eighth house. The eighth house is a malefic house. And so generally, having Jupiter in the eighth house will show that your biggest fortune comes from your lowest points. Like, your lowest points can become the greatest thing that ever happened to you, and they can lead to like transformational moments. The eighth house is about transformation. Jupiter is about fortune. The other thing is that Jupiter's in Gemini. Gemini is about communication. So I feel like you learn the most when you go through things the hard way, when you have this placement. And the main thing that makes you grow, or that gives you fortune, is like the transformation that happens to your mind when you go through a challenging situation. Your mind is incredibly resilient and optimistic, it seems. So like, even when you're facing bad situations, you always see the light at the end of the tunnel. Gemini is about light. Jupiter is about fortune and like optimism. And the eighth house is about malefic situations, negative situations. So that's a good way to describe, Gemini in the eighth house. And furthermore, Jupiter does show abundance and good fortune. So when it's in the eighth house, people will give you a lot of things. People will lend you a lot of things, because the eighth house is the house of other people's possessions. This may also create a tendency to gain a lot of debt, because the eighth house can be about indebtedness, and Jupiter can be about indulgence or extremes. So sometimes these people will go overboard with debt, especially when it comes to transactions like buying, like essentially buying things, buying and selling things. Um, and just overall, you gain a lot of things when you ask for things. That's what it shows too, because Jupiter and Gemini shows you get good fortune from communicating, and the eighth house is about wants and needs. So you gain good fortune from being open and communicating about your wants and your needs, or just generally asking for opportunities or money or things from other people. People will usually come through because you just have a charming or pleasant way of doing so. Um, so anyway, that is Jupiter and Gemini in the eighth house. Next, this takes us to the ninth house placement of Jupiter and Gemini. Jupiter and Gemini in the ninth house will show that you get good fortune from taking a risk on your ideas. The ninth house is about risk, it's about adventure, it's about the unknown to a certain extent. That's why it's next to the eighth house, which is the house of mystery. But it's like when we act on the unknown. It's when we take the first step forward out of the eighth house. The eighth house is when things are mysterious, secrets, or not known. And the ninth house is when we take a step towards the unknown or out of it sometimes. So essentially, Jupiter is in the sign Gemini, which is about your ideas. So when you take a risk, either by communicating or just acting on your inspirations and your curiosity, it actually expands your mind a lot, and that's the main blessing that you get. Also, though, it might reward you in a financial sense too, because the ninth house is about fortune. So you might have more than one great idea throughout your life that pays off significantly when you stop thinking so much and you get started and start pursuing it. Secondly, Jupiter and Gemini here will show somebody that thinks a lot about philosophy, a lot about beliefs, culture and religions, and politics too, foreign relations and stuff like that. And they might consume a lot of information from the media as well. So they can be well cultured and just very knowledgeable about foreign affairs and even local affairs. But they just think a lot about politics. They just think a lot also about their beliefs or about the truth and just about human nature or philosophy and all this kind of stuff. Because the ninth house, which is the house of Jupiter, is just very diverse and well cultured, and it's just about information and diplomatic situations, things such as politics too. So anyway, this now leads us to Jupiter in Gemini in the 10th house. The 10th house is about our careers, our public image, our status, and our success. So Jupiter brings good fortune to your career when it's in the 10th house, especially when you promote yourself, because Jupiter is in Gemini, which is about communication. And also, Jupiter in the 10th house can show somebody that makes a career from being a teacher, because Jupiter is about knowledge and information. And you might have natural wisdom or educational credentials that give you status, authority, or respect in the eyes of others, and put you in a position where you have to communicate those things, or where you benefit from communicating those things. So overall, you achieve good professional, you get good fortune in your profession when you choose to communicate what it is that you know. Jupiter is about knowing, Gemini is about communication, and the 10th house is about success. Also, when you just communicate on public platforms, such as social media, or if you just communicate as a profession, that is when you're going to experience your greatest abundance professionally. Or if it's not about communication, when you choose to promote what it is that you do through media, through information, that's when you will see your highest sales, your highest success, etc. And generally speaking, people might even like the communication aspect of what you do more than the product even itself. Even if they really do like the product, it seems that communication though gives you a lot of like appeal or fortune amongst the masses. So next, this leads us to Jupiter in Gemini in the 11th house. The 11th house is about networking. Gemini is about communication, opportunities, and it's about the mind. And Jupiter is about fortune. So these individuals gain a lot of fortune from being connected and from networking. And they might have an expansive network of friends and associations and people that they can depend on for answers or for resources. And generally, that will be one of the benefits that they experience. They also have this ability to just go into their contacts or ask people they know. And usually, Jupiter is showing that a fortunate situation will arise from that. Because when you take the step to communicate, Jupiter blesses you. Furthermore, the 11th house is about streams of income. So, since Jupiter, the planet of fortune, is here, for one, you can make good money from entrepreneurial endeavors, and especially anything regarding commerce. And the 11th house is about the internet, it's about technology. So, on e-commerce, online sales, and also streams of income related to media, communication, and advertising. So things like being a YouTuber and making money from the ads, or being a blogger, or somebody that has a website. This can be a passive stream of income for these individuals. But generally speaking, when they take a risk on their ideas and on some sort of entrepreneurial endeavor, good fortune can come to them in the form of additional income. And then also when they build a large network, or if they just go towards their network, usually that's one of the most fortunate or easy solutions to their problems. Finally, these people can be very knowledgeable about technology, computers, or the internet. Because Jupiter is about knowledge, Gemini is about information. So they're good with information technology, and they're just good with networking type situations. So they're good with social trends. They're good at predicting, social behavior. They're good at giving advice to people about social media, what to post, how to get validation. And normally the sign that has the 11th house in Gemini using whole signs is Leo. Leo is all about attention, validation, and entertainment. So these people are good in the entertainment business as well. But they just know, they're just wise, knowledgeable, or like well tapped into culture. I would say those that have Jupiter in Gemini in the 11th house are, and they know, also a lot of things about technology perhaps. So these can be the people that are great at social media, or great with cell phones, computers, etc. So and it's like a wisdom that comes naturally to them. It's not something that everybody can just have or pick up on, even if they wanted to. It's like a natural talent. And they could be quick as well. They'd be quick to respond, quick to know how to use social media, like, and how to adapt to the latest trends as well, or like just aware of the latest trends, or like cultural or social changes, because sometimes human behavior actually changes. So next, this leads us to Jupiter in Gemini in the 12th house. This shows somebody that is very creative and imaginative. Gemini is about ideas, The 12th house is about our subconscious mind, our perception, and it's artistic, and it's kind of like the movie that is playing in our minds at all times. It's like how we're perceiving things. It's about our imagination, the meanings that we assign to things. So these people can be very intuitive. Their mind is constantly flowing with messages. So these can be great spiritual communicators. They can do things like such as what I'm doing now, which is to kind of channel information and be able to like speak it. So they would be good at the intuitive arts. And anything that requires speaking from inspiration or intuition, even from, a musical standpoint, or like using being a vocalist and being creative using the voice, these people will be good at. So a lot of singers could have this placement. Now also, their mind is just constantly flowing with messages, information, or truths. And so sometimes the divine just gives them answers to life's questions. So this is what makes them good, like teachers, intuitive speakers, psychics. And their mind is also full of ideas and like creative inspirations at all times. And generally speaking, these people are very optimistic about their dreams and about their futures, because Jupiter is about optimism and the 12th house is about potential and it's about the future. And Gemini is about the mind. So all this is happening in their mind. They're very imaginative and optimistic. They always imagine the best outcome. And I would say they're just overall, creative and intuitive beings. They're also spiritual, and their spirituality blesses them through the realm of communication. So like they're able to take a spiritual truth and explain it. So a lot of good fortune will come to them through communicating their spiritual thoughts, because Jupiter represents fortune. And if it's not about communicating, a lot of times these people like to think about spirituality, or they like to think about the realm of the subconscious, and they make a lot of epiphanies or realizations through doing so. So they're very enlightened people, very wise and smart at the same time, because intelligence does not always mean wisdom, but also wisdom does not mean being clever. But these people kind of have a combination of both, and it's like both sides of intelligence and wisdom contribute to a greater whole. So they're like smart, and they get a lot of epiphanies. They're very spiritual, etc. So with that being said, that is Jupiter in Gemini through each of the houses.